Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. You are the CEO of L4 Learning Solutions, and we are here to talk about a lot of things today, but
Yep.
specifically your book, which I just love the title, Why Smart Leaders Do Stupid Things. That title really resonates with
Love
me
that.
in many ways. I've done a lot of stupid things. But
Haven't we
I
all, right?
we all we
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the reason why, right? Like we really have. But when you look back at your 30 plus career and coaching leaders, what were the patterns that you were seeing that made you think like, something is happening here, like something is going on here?
Yeah. I think it's really when people think past behavior is going to produce future results. And I think over time, just the workplace is so different now. It's so dynamic. We, as leaders, are tasked to do so much more with fewer resources. We have this whole AI element that's coming to life, and some people are running away, some people are running towards it, but it's a different workplace than it was in the past. And I think the big thing that, I mean, the whole premise of the book is smart people can show up during times when things aren't too stressful. You get a lot of sleep, your commute's nice, everyone's showing up at work, they're smart, they're educated, they're credentialed, and they perform really well.
Mhm.
But in today's environment, it's so much more challenging and there's so many more things to do that if and it's so easy just to get like thrown into the rat race and everyone's working so hard trying to accomplish their goals, trying to keep everything moving forward, and there's so many distractions. It's very hard to pause, reflect, think, process, and put together a plan. So really, that's kind of the core element of what's different between a smart leader and what I call a legendary leader, is they know how to stop, pause, ask questions, recalibrate, and they're not relying so much on, oh, this worked in the past at my other company or with my other team, but they lean into more curiosity. It's like, I wonder if this would work. I wonder what could be better. I wonder how I can do this if I have 20% fewer resources than I had before. So I think everything is just so different. Gone are the days of let's put together a 5-year annual plan. It's like, okay, it's great to have some goals, but things change so quickly. And I think the legendary leaders are the ones that stop, pause, recalibrate, and they're making sure they're doing things that are appropriate for the time.
Yeah, it's, I almost ask the question, what's something that leaders are facing now versus what, 10, 15 years ago? But 10 to 15 years ago, we're looking at 2010, 2015 through now.
Yep.
And
Yep.
anybody who's listening to this, just take a second and think about every unprecedented event that has happened since
Right.
that time. So we don't have to go into those. I mean, I think we can kind of figure out all of those different things, whether it's economic changes, the way we work has really changed. We have how many generations working together in
True.
in a workplace, sometimes remotely, sometimes not. Um, but I am curious. You've worked with Fortune 500 executives and founders and just and government leaders and some smart leaders and some legendary leaders. Have you found a through line during your time of similar struggles that they've faced? And you sort of alluded to this a little bit of
Mhm.
we're so fast paced, but is there anything that you're seeing that across industries you're finding that leaders are facing certain struggles that have informed this book?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just doing so much more with less. Like pretty much 9 out of 10 coaching clients are, I'm overwhelmed. I have so much to do. I don't know how to do that. And I was thinking, like, when you were throwing out the years, like, where was I like 10 to 15 years ago?
Yeah.
I was actually doing leadership development for AOL Time Warner. And I remember during the time, this is when like the iPhone was pretty new, and people were saying in the future, people are going to use their smartphones so much more than the internet. And I'm like, how could that even be possible? And now it's like we're looking at, I just ordered this night guard. So I
Uh-huh.
grind my teeth at night. And it's like I wanted to call someone, but oh no, I have to pull out my phone, open the app, do
Hmm.
everything. We're being forced to use this different technology that I think things were just, I don't think we realized it at the time, but the pace was a little slower in the
Hmm.
past. And now we have, like, to what you said, COVID really shaped how we work remotely. We have Zoom, we have so much technology. So there's just so much more that we need to, juggle and prioritize. But I think that's really the big thing is the volume of work, the demands are so much higher and leaders typically are getting rewarded for results.
Hmm.
You have a problem, let's figure out the solution, let's get a quick win. Like when organizations are trying to trim and downsize, they're looking very reactionary. So if we can trim 3% of our workforce by the end of the year, that's going to impact our bottom line and that's going to look really great for shareholders. But what it deteriorates is more of the strategy. So now you have employees that they're like, gosh, Sally was here for 10 years. She's gone. I could be next. It just whittles away at the culture. So I just think there's so many variables to the complexity of the workforce. And it comes down to, so my background is in industrial organizational psychology. I'm not a PhD, I have a master's, but I really like doing experiments. And in the book, I talk about some of the first experiments that I do and how you can learn from behavior. But I think as leaders, it's really important to leverage a lot of other tools and insights that are there. And one of the things that I think is really powerful, and it's free in the book, as soon as you open it up, there's a QR code. You scan it. It's called the Legendary Leader Radar Assessment. You can do it for yourself. You can give it to your team. I don't see the results. It's all confidential and anonymous. And it's a great way, and it's a simple tool in 3 to 4 minutes to identify what are my two strengths, what are my top two challenge areas. And then when you get your team to do that assessment, you can look at like, wow, collectively, we're so good at doing this, but collectively, we all have a challenge of we're not very empathetic and we're not really using all the tools that we could be using for decision making skills. So I think to answer your question, pause, reflect, see what other tools are out there. There's so many great things on YouTube. There's so many great podcasts to listen to. If people can just take some time and reflect and process and think of like, what's a better way of aligning my business and aligning my team using some of these simple tools. I think that's what's more powerful than 10 to 15 years ago, where I think the workplace was just, I don't want to say it was slower, but it was different. And I think now it's more stressful for people if they're not mindful and reflective and pause and see how they're feeling and use some of these tools. So I think it's the main thing and the whole premise of this book is pause, step back, and think about what you can do to go from smart to legendary. And I have a
Yeah.
framework in the book. It's called the Legendary Leader Flight Plan. And it basically unpacks what those 9 vectors are that really can take an average smart leader to that legendary status.
Yeah. And we may get into this as our conversation continues, but one of the things that I'm hearing is we have such high volume of work and we have less people to do it. I feel like we're thinking in quarters instead of even,
Yeah,
the 3 to 5
absolutely.
year strategic
Mhm.
plan. And I think that's the other pressure is when you are a leader who wants to do better, who knows they can improve, where are their strengths, where are their challenges, to find that time to stop
Mhm.
and reflect, to pause, to take the time as a team to do that, it's difficult. I mean, it
It's
really is hard to say to shareholders or to whoever the CEO or COO is, I need time to do this. And we'll probably get into that, but it's that timing piece. I think you're right, is just such a constant stressor. It's hard to share results when you're team building
Right.
and when you're improving upon yourself to ultimately get to a better result.
Right, right. And I think the other piece of this is it's not just let's look at the goal, let's put together a plan, let's empower the teams, let's get everyone working. But like you said, it's pausing, maybe it's quarterly to say, okay, does this even make sense for us to continue to be doing? What is it that we should sunset or say no to? So a lot of times getting more done is by turning off some projects that maybe we can deprioritize or it just doesn't make sense anymore. We now have AI that can do spreadsheets for us. So do we really need to be having these manual reports? So I think just it's that pause reflection, not only what I need to be doing, but what do I need to stop doing?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was working with a client a couple days ago, and we've all heard of to-do lists, we've all heard of prioritizing. Here's the three top things that are important to focus on for the week or the day. And we started having this conversation about, okay, well, what are the things that you should not do today? Like, I should not avoid a conflict, or I should not cancel that meeting because I know something else came up. So it was kind of an interesting conversation. This is outside the book, but as we're putting together our plans, it's not always like all the goals and all the activities and all the tasks, but what are the things that we actually say, I'm not going to do this? And some of it is value based, some of it is competency based, but really having an opportunity to put together a really good plan and giving people permission to speak up when it's like, hey, does it still make sense that we do this? Are we attacking this the right way? What do we do? And I think um, a big thing that's the differential between smart and legendary is those legendary leaders create the environment where people can speak up, they can push back, they can say no. And if we've had so many wins throughout our career, our ego tends to perhaps go up.
Right.
And we've made so many great, smart decisions. We feel very confident. It's very hard, challenging, and humbling for leaders to pause and say, you know what? Does anyone else have a different perspective? How is my leadership today? What could I be doing to kind of connect with people or increase performance? So it's a lot about what we need to do, but then a lot of talking about what we should not be doing. So it's a balance between the two.
Michael, it sort of dovetails in what I've been thinking about here. And your title, I love your title. Why? And I want to ask you, when you say smart leaders do stupid things, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's the smart leaders that are riding on the momentum and having so much great progress. Um, if they're not paying attention to themselves, they can do stupid things. So I'm a big fan of the Hogan personality assessments, leadership assessments. It's basically we use it a lot with top talent or high potential employees to try to get them to accelerate their development, see things differently. And I won't go into all the details, but basically, there's like the bright side of leadership where we show up, everything's great, we're smart, we're educated, we can apply everything. And then there's the dark side of leadership. It's like what happens during times of stress, pressure, when if we're not paying attention, then we can do really stupid things and derail. For example, the leader that is really good at setting expectations when there's times of stress, they may lean in too much. They may micromanage. They may just be all over everything that can actually shut people down and have the opposite effect. So I think the big difference from smart to legendary, the legendary ones that are actually pausing and really doing deep reflection and examining their values and trying to determine what can be done differently. So I think that's kind of the big difference is they realize like, okay, when I'm stressed out, I may be more emotional. I may make quicker decisions. So I need to like consciously pull back to think because I know that I can get very upset or very excited or whatever. So they're very, very, very self-aware to the point when times are stressful, they can grab onto those moments and say, okay, like I know that I make quick decisions when I'm stressed. Maybe I need to take a couple, days and think through this before I move forward.
Sure, sure. And situations like that can cause breakdowns in leadership. And one of the things you talk about in your book is that those breakdowns don't happen with a bang, but with
Yeah.
silence. So,
Yeah.
can you give us a couple of the earliest warning signs that something is quietly going wrong in an office or a company?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of leaders where it's very small things like starting to canceling team meetings or cutting team meetings short to go run to another priority,
Mhm.
or just slowly detaching. I have a story in the book, and I was working with this leader, and they had this goal of changing the corporate culture. I mean, everybody does,
Yeah.
but it was very much of a passion project for him. So what he did, and this is like a leader of like a big team at a very well-known research-based company, he basically locked himself away for 6 weeks, didn't respond to emails, didn't meet with his team, didn't have one-on-ones, and he focused on building this culture program based on what was in his head. And 6 weeks later, when we actually rolled it out, people were like, well, who provided input to this? Like, where did this come from? Like, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? So I think when people start pulling back, like as I work a lot with like HR practitioners, and it's like, look at what the behaviors are of your leaders. And if they're starting to do things a little bit differently, like stop it, call them on it, have a conversation.
Mhm.
But I think when people just start to detach and they get kind of sucked up, maybe it's a very rewarding or challenging project that they really want to focus on, but they become distracted and they lose sight of the goal.
And it sounds like those leaders can get isolated in that sort of period where they're trying to do something different and they don't reach out for help, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I think in our society, a lot of people think asking for help is actually a sign of weakness.
Yep.
So that's one of the mind shifts that we can actually focus on, where actually asking for help can actually give you more information and see around corners that other people don't have. So yeah.
And I mean, that sounds like it could also be a blind spot for leaders as well in
Mhm.
that inability to ask for help. And why do you think those high performing leaders are often the last people to see their own blind spots?
So there's so many different reasons for that. I think a lot of it has to do with they think decisions that they've made in the past are going to serve them in a successful way moving forward.
Mm,
Like, for example, if someone is an individual contributor and they're known as the rock star in the organization, they do such great work, they achieve great results, they build great relationships, and then they get promoted. If they keep doing the work themselves, there is a high likelihood that they're going to derail. So I'm a big fan of the Leadership Pipeline book, which looks at what are the critical transitions that we have to make when we go from an individual contributor to a manager to a director to a VP. And it's so easy for people to say, wow, this worked before in my past role. I'm going to do more of it in the other role. But actually, like, it's letting go, it's delegating, it's saying no. As you move up and go from director to vice president, it's all about building your network, establishing connections inside and outside the organization. So it's just as people are putting together a plan for their journey, finding ways to say, okay, if I want to be a director in 18 months, I always say like 18 months is sort of a good sweet spot for those high potential employees. If I want to be a director in 18 months, then what are the things that I need to start picking up that will be required of me when I'm a director? And what are some things that I can start letting go of or delegating? So it's actually sort of doing the job proving that you can be successful at that next role before you're actually given the title. So it's evaluating all those transition points whenever we have them. It could be a promotion, it could be a new org structure, it could be you just got 2 new resources on your team, it could be your high potential employee just got poached by a competitor. Like whenever those are big transitions, those are all opportunities to like reset and recalibrate.
I'm also curious about what might be the most common self-deception that leaders will fall under pressure to. Is it being, that rock star, or is it something else?
So I think it comes down to the human brain and neuro leadership. Like when you look at our brains untrained are so primitive. And I think we all have this drive of, I want to be right. I want to be correct. To the point when we don't have all the information, our brains will kind of make up a story so that we have all of the elements of the story so that we can make that business case to say that we're right. So I think a lot of it is like hacking your brain. And there's so much good research and good people that talk about brain-based leadership. But I think it's not relying so much on what you think is right and riding on your success, but it's actually cultivating opportunities to gather more information, ask for feedback, and help, like I say, see around corners. So yeah, I think we just want to be right. And because of that, we just keep pushing forward. And when we had small projects and we were right and we had a lot of momentum and great reputation and everyone saying, wow, Richard, that was such a great job on that project. And then we have a bigger project that's twice as big. We can't use those same principles on that smaller project because the scale is different. So I think we just want to be right. And it's really hard for those leaders to be humble and say, you know what? I don't know if this is the right thing to do. Please give me some feedback. And for some leaders, they can ask the question, they have great trust, they have great rapport with their employees. Others, maybe not so much. And those are opportunities where a 360 feedback or some form of asking people for feedback in an anonymous way can really help identify some of those blind spots that we talked about earlier and help, again, make people transition to that legendary status.
And where did the legendary leader flight plan come from? And I think like one of the phrases, and I'm so disappointed in myself every time I say it, is like, I'm building the plane while I'm flying it. And I'm like, that needs to just like Men in Black be removed from my brain. But
yeah,
what pressures do you see in leadership that actually are similar to flying a plane? And can you talk a little bit more about the plan?
Yeah. So I was part of a writing academy with the National Speakers Association. And about a month before my very first draft manuscript, and it was a piece of crap. It was so bad. I had all these different stories and thoughts and everything. And I'm like, you know what? This is so disjointed. I wonder if there's a way to hang all this together. And I'm a very visual person. So I have lots of flip charts and post-it notes. So I started like looking at behaviors that I talk about in the book and putting them on post-it notes, and then taking those post-it notes and clustering them on buckets. And I'm like, I wonder if all this could actually fit some sort of a model. So literally a month before the book was due, I came up with this legendary acronym and I kind of put it all together and I came up with it. And originally it was called the Legendary Leader Blueprint, because I'm like, okay, this is kind of like a blueprint to do it. And then one of the stories that I have in the book, I'm going to derail and then I'm going to
please.
One of the stories that I have it's so compelling to me is a story of Flight 401. This is a long time ago. This is a flight that was from New York to Miami. And as the pilots were making their final approach, they hit the landing gear button and the light didn't go on. And long story short, everybody in that plane was distracted to the point no one was flying the plane and it crashed. And there's so much learning, and it applies to so much of the Legendary Leader Flight Plan. In the book, it's in the decision-making chapter. But so one of my favorite shows is Air Disasters. And I know that sounds really morbid, but basically, without exception, in any type of incident or accident, it's always a failure of either bad leadership or bad communication. So I know it's a little bit morbid, but that's a story that I watched that episode and I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. I was preparing for a big keynote and I'm like, I wonder if I can make this a little bit stickier. So I had the Legendary Leader Flight Plan. And then with that, I came up with these black box reflection questions. So at the end of each chapter, we basically have a story of bad leadership. We have a section called spirals that looks inside the mind of the bad leader. They're like sides of the book, and it looks inside the mind of the lousy leader. And for example, some people are leading by fear, but really they just want to have a good impact. They want to have good results. So it looks at that. And then we also have, as I said, we have black box reflections, and then we have final approach questions. So it just made sense to try to pull all these aviation themes into the book. So it's more of like when you think of your journey, and you said it's almost like building the plane as we're flying it. A lot of it is like, what is your goal? What is your flight plan? Let's take a look at all the turbulence that's planned or bad weather, building our contingency plan. And then when the project's over, let's go back and do a black box reflection to try to figure out like what worked that we can carry forward. We can maybe share that with other teams. And what are the things that didn't work that sort of nearly derailed us, and how can we learn from it? So the whole aviation theme just sort of popped as I was getting ready to do another presentation. So I've rewritten this book like 5 times. So that was probably the fourth or fifth time that I rewrote the book. And I just try to package things a little bit, but it all comes down to, in aviation, whenever there's an accident, they get this black box. They listen to the flight recorder, they look at all the data, they look at past maintenance records, they do all of the things to try to find out what is the root cause of what happened. And it could be something that an airplane flying ahead of them 5 years ago, someone forgot to put the bolt on and a part fell off and then hit it. Like, it's just so interesting, the chain of events. So I really wanted to embrace this aviation theme just to get people to think a little bit about, all right, how do we kind of make the parallel into aviation and look at the black box and the legendary flight plan. So that's how it all how it all comes together and how it hangs together.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm a visual person as well. So I think it's really helpful. And without giving the entire book away,
Yeah.
what's the part of the flight plan that leaders tend to skip and definitely pay for later? And
Yeah.
and I just want to highlight the book opens phenomenally with an example that I think a lot of people have dealt with that type of leader. And I was kind of thinking about that in the back of my head when I was
Yeah.
thinking of this question.
Yeah. Yeah. And the story that is the introduction is a leader jumps on a conference room table and screams and yells at someone to try to get results. And I won't tell you if it worked or it didn't work, but it's kind of an interesting way that sort of like creates a story that we can refer to it throughout the entire book. But to answer your question, so in the Legendary Leader Flight Plan, the model stands for yielding, liberation. It spells legendary, expectations, growth, empathy, negotiation, decision making, adaptability, resilience, and yielding. So, and these aren't all mutually exclusive, but basically, if these are the 9 vectors that we're paying attention to as leaders, it can really, really differentiate between that smart leader to the legendary leader. But I think the one that is very different than a lot of other leadership frameworks is liberation. And I'll just read the headline. Liberation creates the conditions for innovation, openness, and risk taking. And I don't think a lot of leaders look at that. So that's what can I do to make sure that the quiet voices are heard? What can I do to make sure that the very experienced, confident, very vocal person in the room has some airtime, but also knows when they need to pull back and let other people come to the table? So liberation is almost creating a culture. It could be systems, it could be processes. How are you going to do your one-on-ones? What are the questions that you'll use in the one-on-ones? What are the team meeting structure? How often do you do it? What happens if someone pushes back? I mean, I have stories in the book of people that have pushed back and they lose their job. So what do you do to celebrate when people actually push back? So I think liberation is one of the biggest opportunities for leaders because we want power, we want control, we want everything to be right, we want success to be achieved as efficiently as possible. But sometimes it's what do we need to do to create an environment where people can speak up and come to the table? And I think that's really hard, especially when you look at, I won't go too political, but if you look at the landscape of everything, like there's not a lot of role models that people have. So there's not like a lot of leaders that are like, wow, look at how they're creating this environment where we can speak up and we can push back. So I think for me, just to derail for a little bit, as a leader and as a coach, I've learned so much of what to do to be excellent or be legendary by just looking at the derailers from other leaders and doing the opposite. And I think a lot of this, like looking at liberation, the opposite of that is direct and control and telling people what to do. And there's a time and a place for that. If there's a crisis or an
Sure.
emergency or the building's on fire, then that's not the time to say, okay, what do you guys think we should do? There's a time and a place
Yeah.
for all of this. They're
Mhm.
almost like dials where you dial some of them up and dial them down. But I think liberation is the biggest opportunities for leaders. And it's one of those things that is more important over than urgent. So urgent are those fire drill things, those crises that we have to address to that typically we get a lot of momentum, we get a lot of adrenaline, we get a lot of success when we achieve it. But the important things take a little bit more time. So how do you build that culture within your team or your organization to actually give people space and permission to speak up and to learn new things or try new things or have different perspectives? So there's so much to it, but I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
liberation is like a really important area. And it's the first part of the model, just because I think it's really important for people to try to think like, what's the environment that you want to create? And how, if people felt more liberated, how could that actually increase the performance, the engagement, the potential of
Yeah.
everyone?
Yeah. And it's interesting. Richard and I have talked about this in other conversations we've had of oftentimes in our lives, we see the end result and not everything it took to get there. And
Right.
so I think sometimes when you are an individual contributor that is now in a management position and you're new to that table, you
Mm-hmm.
may not know how to lead a team in that way because you've just seen the end results. You've seen the person who needs to be the face of the result, who owns the outcomes. Um, and so it's interesting to understand people's journeys to leadership, I would
Yeah.
imagine from your perspective, and even things like what did we see growing up?
We all bring these stories and experiences to the workforce. And I think when we create that environment to let people share a little bit about, tell me about what your first impression of a leader was when you were younger, and have people just like share and show about that. Like that can make a team so much more cohesive and build trust. So it's like doing those things that I hate the F word. I hate people, oh, let's do those fluffy things. But just taking time before a meeting starts and asking some questions like that can really help people work better together. And like, oh, so you didn't grow up in the United States. So maybe that's why you see things a little bit different than me. But, I'm curious to know more, like, how did that work for you? And how does, being maybe a little quiet or more passive how does that work for you? And like, I wonder if there's times where I can be a little bit more curious and quiet and listening and reflective that could help me. And let's kind of talk about how we can complement each other's strengths. So I think, yeah, that liberation piece is so important. And you're right. So much of what happens to us in the past really kind of warps our brain, if you want to go to the dark side for a minute, about how we think good leadership should show up. And I think kind of related to that is like we have a leadership crisis. There's very few of the younger generation that want to say, "Hey, I want to become a CEO of a multinational organization." They look at the time, they look at the stress, they look at, okay, the money is really good, but these people have no lives. And unless we fix that perception or construct of what really powerful leadership should look like, we're going to have no one to run companies in 5 to 10 years because no one wants to step up to be a leader. So that's a whole nother crisis. That's probably another topic for another
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's just the definition of leadership really needs to be examined. And I think like using the legendary leader framework can at least help people have conversations to talk about, okay, what can we do to create an environment where people actually want to step up and actually want to help and grow the organization and grow the team rather than say, no, I want to work from home and I want to do something that's more meaningful. And I'm fine sharing a house with 5 people. I don't need my own. Like these are just all things that are a consequence of how we've defined leadership. And even the movies like Wolf of Wall Street, where people have been so assertive, it's like, hey, where's there a good movie about leaders who lean into a posture of liberation or empathy? You know, it's just
Yeah.
like, it's not
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in sort of in thinking about that, and the younger generation seeing leaders sort of lose altitude in
Yeah.
certain
Good
respects,
word.
in terms of credibility and trust and momentum. For those leaders who've lost that altitude, what's the first move that they should be making?
So I really like an idea, and there's this whole new thought. Like my thought is performance management systems don't work. If I'm waiting to the end of the year to tell someone that you're a 3 out of 5,
Mhm.
it's not going to do anything. So I think one of the first moves that leaders should make is to do, let's call it a snapshot or a scorecard of
Mhm.
every person on their team,
Okay.
looking at what are their strengths, what are their opportunities, where do I see this employee in 6 to 12 months to maybe 5 years. So it has a little bit of an element of a succession planning, but also trying to differentiate between who are the top talent, who are the high potential employees, who are those core employees that we need to show up and continue to do good jobs, and then who are some employees that maybe they're in the wrong job, maybe they're in the wrong organization, and we need to lean in and have a conversation. So I think one of the first things that we can do is actually step back and think of the strengths and opportunities and who has potential and how can we unlock some of the potential of some of those younger people, and how do we do it? Do we send them to a conference? Do we give them a mentor? Do we give them a buddy? Do we have them work on a stretch assignment with another department? But opportunities to give people experiences to let them figure out what their passion is and what they like to do. And if someone isn't really interested in being a leader, maybe we can assign them a small project and have them be a team lead on it. And who knows, they may find ways to do it. So I think as leaders or managers in this case, architecting a process where we're looking at all of our talent. We're doing our assessment in our head, and then we're actually sitting down with the employees to say, what is it that motivates you? What really like, what's your passion? Where
Mhm.
can we lean more into your passion and have you play to your strengths and your passions and help us get really good work done? So I think it's doing a snapshot and an assessment of your team. It can be something very short and sweet. It could be something very comprehensive where HR maybe comes in and helps you do that. But I think that's a really good way of looking at potential and looking at performance because there's a very big difference between the two. People can perform really well, do their job, But potential, as I see it, is the potential for growth, the potential for more responsibility, the potential for maybe even a lateral move. Let's go from HR to finance to round out your skills. So maybe in 4 years from now, you can run a business and you understand kind of all the components of that.
Yeah.
So I think just taking time, thinking through where is your team, who are the rock stars, where are your strengths, that maybe some of those people that have great strengths in your team can partner with some other people that they don't know how to delegate, they don't know how to prioritize, they don't know how to have those deep conversations. So it's almost like looking at profiles of your entire team and trying to figure out how you can get people to plug and play better. And I think with that, people can grow more individually, personally, and professionally, and you'll have an opportunity to see who can rise up to that leadership status.
Sure. And that sounds like you're doing something more evolved than just performance reviews, because year after year that I was at the journal, we had to go through, we had to go through performance reviews, and I hated those days
Yeah.
because I felt like I had only maybe a couple of weeks to jam in a year's worth of work into one of these short forums. And performance reviews to me feel very inefficient and not really representative of the body of work that workers do on a
Right.
daily basis.
Right. Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And I get it. Like you want to have some sort of quantitative measure of like what the performance is with everyone.
Sure.
I get it. But really, if you're really trying to build a culture, build a legendary organization, it's all about feedback and having people, tell me one thing that I could improve. Give me 2 words, one that describes my brand in a positive way and one that describes my brand in maybe not so positive way. And just opening up so people can actually have those conversations and be a little bit more open and transparent. And I think the big thing is giving people feedback, capturing that feedback, and doing it as quickly as possible, not waiting till the end of the year before,
Yeah.
or even a
Yeah.
mid-year where
Mhm.
it's too late.
Yeah. It's too late. And so earlier, you talked about black box reflections. And so
Mhm.
can you expand on that idea a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. At the end of the book, this book is designed to be like part coach. Like there's many times where we go through situations and we just move right on to the next project. So the intent is to actually pause, reflect, and think of, okay, what did you learn? So, for example, I'm looking at the inside the black box for the chapter on negotiation. So the N in legendary in the model is negotiation. So it just summarizes what you've read. So some of the bullets are control kills clarity. A promise is a contract. Preparation builds presence, and listening changes everything. And then underneath it, it has what were the patterns, what was the questions, what were assumptions that you made. So the black box is more of an opportunity to kind of think, and they're not really questions, they're more like bullet points. But what we do have is there's a companion guide. It's normally $50, and I'll tell you how you can get it for free later, but all the questions in the book are in this companion guide. So as you're reading the book, you can answer them in the companion guide. And we actually go a little bit deeper into those black box reflections. But it's just an opportunity, again, to go with the aviation theme. When you're trying to figure out what happened, it's thinking through what can we do to reflect, to ask questions, to gather more information so that we can learn from it, do better ourselves, tell other people on how they can improve. So it's just an opportunity to pause, reflect, and think. And then right after the inside the black box, there's final approach questions. And those of you that are coaches, there's different types of coaching certifications. And these are like 3 powerful questions at the end of each chapter that they're super hard. Like, I don't think you can like read the question and answer it. You really have to sit with it. And I'm just going to pick a random one. Where am I quietly compromising inch by inch in ways that wear down my integrity?
That's a powerful question.
So that's like, wow, how would I do that? And I tell people, like, read these questions, pick one, sit with it, come back to it, maybe even throw these questions out to your team. But it's a great way to kind of tie up the chapters and give people an opportunity to actually do something with it. So, and I always say, so there's three different frames. There's the lousy leaders. It's people that are not paying attention for whatever reason, they derail. Then you have the smart leaders. They're educated, they're experienced, they're good. But if they're not paying attention to these blind spots, as we talked about before, then they can derail. And then the legendary ones that know how to operate in times of ambiguity and time where trust is a little bit low, what can they do? So,
is there one reflection that every leader needs to sit with for this upcoming year?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's looking at intent and action. Like, how many times have people said, "Oh, I'm sorry you got upset. That was not my intention. That was not my intent." So I think the question would be, where did my intent and impact diverge, and why was that? So I think that's the reflection. Like, look at those things that you intended.
Yeah.
Now pull back and look bigger at the impact that you made. And what do you notice? What's different? Was there a blind spot? Was there an assumption? Like, what can you learn from that that can actually help you determine your direction for the next year? So I think it's some sort of a reflection question, and balancing, looking at what was your intent when the year started? What was your impact at the end? And can you dive in deeply and try to figure out what are those things that really served you well, that gave you this amazing impact in some of these areas? And where did you intend to do well or increase performance? And for whatever reason, it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it. So I think that's one question.
That's a great question, because I think it really creates a little bit of friction with the leaders to sort of have them stop and think about, as you said, the impact of what they're doing and how that will affect the team as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful question, wonderful reflection to ask. And and
And I
go
like
ahead.
what you said about the friction. Like, that's a really good word. What was the friction that you encountered? And like, what did you do with it? Did you acknowledge it? Did you give it a title? Did you like describe what the friction really came to? Like, if you actually like blew up this visual picture of what the friction was, like, what would it look like? And how can you get that to the surface so that you can actually think about it and say, okay, and is friction good? Sometimes friction can motivate people and keep people on their toes, but
Sure.
where did the friction like shut down creativity and performance? So I love that word, friction. I think I'd throw that into the question.
So, and you mentioned empathy a little bit earlier, and sometimes we don't think about, we don't connect empathy and leadership sometimes. And, we associate empathy with one of those quote unquote fuzzy skills, those quote unquote soft skills. But now, how can leaders balance both empathy and accountability without swinging too far in either direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a really big challenge. And there's times when I think we need to dial up empathy and dial it down. One of the stories, just to derail for a second, one of the stories in the book, I was like 18 and I was asked to terminate an employee. So it's like, when you're terminating an employee, I'm not trying to say you should be a jerk, but that's probably not the time to say, how are you feeling and how are things going? Like, you need to kind of dial down some of that empathy. It's more of that situational awareness that you have. But the story in the book is like, in my mind, I said, "You're terminated. This is your last day of employment." What I actually said was, "This isn't working out. You're going to need to go home." And so she showed up to work the next day, and everyone's like, "Krumpak, why is she here? I thought you like terminated her." I'm like, "I did." And that's like one of those opportunities where I'm like, there's a time where you need to be a little bit more direct and
Mhm.
maybe not so soft and empathetic, that it's really important. But it's interesting because empathetic, it's one of those F words that some people say. It's kind of fluffy or feel good, or I don't know, it's just a softer skill. But actually, it can be the fuel that actually just makes the fire glow so much more. And I think there's a time and a place for empathy. And in the book, I have these catchphrases that try to make the topics a little bit stickier. And the catchphrase that I use is connection over correction. And typically someone comes to us and they're, asking for time off or asking for more time on a project. And our brains go to, "Oh my gosh, why isn't she doing this? Why isn't she following the rules? Like, why is this taking so hard?" But if we can actually be open and curious and try to be more empathetic, we can actually get more performance and more results from people. And so it's one of those important things where if you build empathy, we talked about trust before,
Mhm.
that can really help. And the story that I share in the book is I had just started this great position with a technology company. I was running leadership development. I had just moved to New York. I had problems with my mom was sick, my dog was sick. I couldn't find any place to live. I was running out of money because moving was so crazy. I was just so stressed out that I could not focus. And my boss came up to me and she's like, "Michael, are you ill? Feel free to open up to me. I'm here to help you." And so we walked into the conference room and I just laid it on the line. And I'm like, "I don't know how to do all this. I have all these personal problems. I can't live in this corporate apartment anymore." So she's like, "Well, what do you need?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm so hung up in the pain and the emotion and the problem. I didn't know what I needed to get out of that." And just by her leaning in and asking that question, I'm like, "I need to find a place." She's like, "I know this great neighborhood. Let's go look at some places together. I'll show you around. We can stop for a glass of wine." It was like I was like ready to quit and resign. And that opportunity where she saw me for who I was and didn't judge and helped me reprioritize. We figured it out in probably 30, 45 days, and I was back. Like that was a situation where I don't remember the exact words that she used, but I remember how I felt and how I felt listened to and connected to. So now that's a story that I take forward when someone's coming to me and they're having personal problems and they're not doing their work. I work with a lot of assistants and they have all these challenges and everything. And I get really emotionally frustrated. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why is it so hard?" I'm like, "Well, I remember when this leader kind of pulled me aside, leaned in, asked me those empathetic questions, helped me figure it out. And I worked probably 10 times harder for her as a result of that because I knew that she cared. It wasn't just about taking the project to the finish line, but I wanted to like do well in her eyes. I wanted to perform well. I wanted to have really good results. So I think empathy is really pausing, taking a breath, being curious. Like, I wonder why this person is having challenges. I wonder why the person's coming in late or why they look like they haven't slept. And, without making too many assumptions, just be caring and curious and ask some questions. So I think connection over correction. I mean, she could have come to me and said, "Get your stuff together. You need to, do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5."
Mm.
But she didn't. She like took the work aside, asked some questions, and that was a real moment of my life that I refer back to when I'm like, "You know what? I need to be a little bit more empathetic and connect with someone in ways that I haven't yet before."
That is a fantastic story. I really love that she took the time and care to understand what you were actually going through And I'm curious, and I really, to me, that calls out that empathy can be a superpower, especially for leaders. And I'm wondering, should empathy be a behavior that is normalized among leaders, but really isn't?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that we should call out. And there's probably other words for empathy that might resonate with people differently. But yeah, it's like we all make so many sacrifices to show up at work. I'm not really a big Taylor Swift fan, but I was watching this interview that she did, and she's like, I've showed up on stage in front of thousands of people with like a stomach virus or a stomach flu. And it's like, you just kind of like push through it and you figure it out. So I think it's just sort of mustering up the courage and kind of staying focused and moving forward, that are just really important. So that was just kind of a little sidebar that I thought was kind of interesting to stay focused.
And
Yeah,
I think
great.
I think the other thing that empathy is like having such a moment right now in the cultural conversation. But the example that you gave is really, and to Richard's point of like, is this something that should be included in the leadership conversation? Is you said earlier, we show up as people, not employees. And
Yeah.
what that leader showed is she saw you as a person. You have a lot of responsibility as a leader. We think it's just the results, but it's the people. And the
Yeah.
people are what's getting you the results. And
Yeah.
it's interesting we're even having the conversation, because when you say that it's about the people who are ultimately getting you the results, how do you get good results? Do you just abuse people? And sometimes that works. I mean, like we
Yeah.
have examples of that.
Yeah.
Or do you actually care for that individual and that team and that group? And that was a beautiful example that you gave of that. I mean, being a leader is a huge, huge responsibility.
It is. It is. And I think when you're really busy, you don't think of, oh, I need to connect with the person. I need to ask how they're doing. I need to say, what can I do to support you? Like it's all about, oh my gosh, I'm behind schedule. I have so many deadlines. I have 500 emails to get to. But if we don't consciously pause and step back and be curious and ask about the person and how are you doing? Just a simple question of how you're doing. Just knowing that a leader has cared to ask me that question, then I'm going to work so much harder for that person as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's something that we should be thinking through a little bit more. And we recently had a panel discussion and we were talking about what are some of the biggest challenges, and empathy came up. And empathy, if you look at it, it's not like the hardest skill to define, but it's one of the hardest skills to actually implement,
Mhm.
especially when things are crazy in the workplace. So
Yeah.
yeah, like these are just all points. Like I would say, have this legendary leader model up somewhere. And when you're stressed, just take a peek at it and like, let me look at my decision making today. Let me look at my negotiations. Is there something that I could be doing to negotiate a little bit better than I am? We talked about liberation. Like, what can I do to maybe pull back and ask more questions and get more opinions that I think might slow me down in the moment? But actually, it's going to accelerate your momentum so much because now everyone's bought in and feels like they're part of the team. They're going to work harder and they're going to work smarter. So,
Yeah, my question to you is actually going to be, I was a young leader and I had inherited this team that was pretty good. I mean, they were pretty good, but
yeah.
and I am someone who asks like, how are you doing? And let's open up the floor. And I think sometimes I even now go a little bit more too much on the empathy side and the everybody contribute side than
Okay.
otherwise. So that's
Yeah.
something I work on. But I remember sitting in a meeting once. I probably looked like this, for people who are just listening, like I had my heads on my forehead, like I didn't realize how I looked. And I just remember thinking like, I'm so tired of everyone's feelings. Like, can we just get this shit done? Like, I just, like, and there's that pressure on you. So I just want to acknowledge like leadership is hard. Like it is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah,
And
very hard.
and if you're like me in that moment thinking, maybe I'm the problem, Where
Yeah.
would you
Right?
encourage someone to start? I mean, obviously they're listening to this, they've acknowledged like,
Mhm.
maybe it's
Mhm.
me. Like, what's a good, and Richard and I talk about this all the time. You don't have to have the whole plan, but what's the next best step that someone can
Exactly.
take?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you ask that question again? I'm not sure if I completely understood it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was a really long run-on sentence. If someone's listening to this and thinking, I might be the problem in this
Mm,
situation, they're in a leadership position, um, and what would you say to them is the thing that they can do in the immediate for
yeah.
them to start on this journey to be a better leader?
So I think this is really an easy answer and it's a simple solution. It's to go talk to a peer or someone that you trust and just ask them for feedback. Is there anything I'm doing that's shutting down performance? Is there anything that you're hearing about what my team is saying about how they're working with me that I should know about? It's just like phone a friend in times of
Yeah.
stress, especially when you need to make a really important decision. And maybe you're like 90% confident that you're making the right thing, but someone could say, you know what? Did you know that we just hired this other firm or we're in the middle of an acquisition? You're like, no, I didn't know that. That changes everything. So I think it's leaders that can crack that shell of when they're in a vacuum and they think everything is going great to say, you know what? Maybe I should like something in my gut feels weird. Maybe I should phone a friend and maybe I should ask for support. And going back to neuro leadership, there's sort of the head, the heart, and the gut. If you look at how many neurons are in the stomach, it's so many more than we need to actually like digest food. So like when you have that gut feeling of like something feels off, like acknowledge that. Go talk to people. Talk to maybe someone outside the organization that's not biased and is completely neutral. But it's all about finding quick, efficient data points to round out the information that we have and help us make better decisions. And I think phone a friend or find a peer. A lot of companies, like when they do engagement surveys, they're like, I have a friend at work that I can trust. And some people kind of laugh at that question, but those people that have colleagues that they can, maybe it's another director in another department, that they can kind of share each other's challenges and what has worked and what isn't, that can really give a lot of insight and help leaders really step it up and round the corner. So I think it's asking for feedback and sometimes out of your immediate circle can be really impactful.
And when readers finish this book, like they've done the work, they've taken the time, what is your ultimate goal, or what do you hope they are showing up as leaders after this, sort of process?
Yeah, I don't think this book is one of those things where you read it and you're done. And that's why we have the quick assessment that like you don't have to take it, but if you take the legendary leader radar assessment, it's going to tell you the couple things that you need to work on. So you could like flip right to the chapter. And the book is organized in a way in the table of contents. It's like, if I read this chapter, here's how long it's going to take and what I'm going to be able to do after it. So I think once you read the book, keeping it in eyesight and pulling it out, realizing that, oh my gosh, I just got a new leader. And now I need to establish confidence and build trust and build a new relationship. I wonder if I should talk about influencing or decision making, or I need to think about liberation, like finding more about where they come from, asking questions, finding their strengths. So I think it's almost like I have this dream of putting together a field book sometime, but as of now, it's a book that helps you identify what you're good at. And I think that's really important. We all have amazing strengths that we probably are not leveraging as much as possible. So I think reading this book and say, you know what? I got this. Like I'm really good at setting expectations. I need to like leverage that, or I need to help other people set expectations as well. Or I know that empathy isn't something that comes naturally to me. So maybe I need to go back and take a look at the empathy chapter. And like I said, those final approach questions at the end of each book, they're tough questions. Like literally, if you look every quarter at the chapter and find a new question, like that in itself can really give a lot of traction and momentum to you. So I think when people read the book, they know what a lousy leader looks like. So they can catch themselves when, in times of pressure and stress, they're like, ooh, I just yelled at this person. I just barked at this person. I just canceled a meeting because I didn't have time to connect. I think they know what that lousy leadership looks like, so they can focus on staying in the neutral, which is more of kind of the smart leadership. But then they can prioritize, what are the things that I really need to do, that if I picked up these new skills, I can actually not only be legendary myself, but I can build a legendary team, build a legendary organization, and achieve legendary results. So I think it's more of a field book and an opportunity to come back and revisit it and just to stay sharp. And there's so much that you can do. I also love when leaders, I had a book fair recently, and a leader came up to me and she's like, I want 12 copies for everyone on my team. So like giving people the book, having them do the assessment, having a common framework to have like a book club where you read a chapter. The chapters are like 20 minutes each, 20, 25 minutes. Come back and talk about it. Like those are things that you can do to carry the momentum and keep going. So I don't think this is a one and done, but I designed the book to be a very easy read. My thought was, you see it in an airport, you pick it up, you hop on a flight, 3 hours, you're at your destination, you've read the book, you're like, wow, I know more about myself. I'm motivated, I'm inspired, I'm intrigued by some of these questions that I need to think long and hard about. And I want to share this with my team and share it with others. So I think that's really one of my goals for my Smart Leaders Boost.
Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Is there anything we didn't talk about today, Michael, that you want to make sure listeners hear or know?
Um, I think just know that leadership is a journey and you can't do it by yourself. And I'm not saying that this is the only book that you need to get and this is going to magically transform you. But as a leader, I think being open and curious to look at, what are the other books out there? What are the best leaders doing? What are leaders falling down on that we can learn from? And putting together your own personal toolkit of what works well for you now, having time to reflect to make sure that those tools are still relevant in 6 months to 6 years from now. But I think someone that, to what we just talked about, can pause, can reflect, can look at different frameworks, whether it be the Legendary Leader Flight Plan or other frameworks that are out there, but finding what works and validating that it is actually working. Because in the book, I have stories of a boss that I worked for. She read a different book every week and she was always talking about all these great new leadership techniques and everything, but she didn't apply any of them herself.
Yeah.
And it was like the laughing stock. So find out what works for you, try it. Don't just read it and talk about it, but actually do something with it. This is all about transformation. How do we transform ourselves from that smart leader to a legendary leader? And whatever recipe, whatever ingredients you find, try it, put it in your cool toolkit, try it on, see how it works. And that's really what's going to separate kind of the average from the legendary. Those people that are curious and open and willing to be uncomfortable, willing to try some things, fall on their face, laugh at themselves, make some mistakes, and get back up and try something a little bit different. And that's really what we're trying to do in terms of building better leaders.
Love that. Really love that.
Yeah. Well, we will have all your information in the show notes, but how can people find you?
Yeah, the best way is on LinkedIn. I'm Coach Krumpak, Krumpak, like crumbs in the pack. And then the website to the book is whysmartleadersdostupidthings.com. So those are the two best ways. And like I said, if you are interested in the book, we have a Kindle version, we have a paperback and a hardback on Amazon. And if you message me, I'll give you the free companion guide that helps you actually get the most out of the book. So I'm happy to support people with a little free tool as well. But why smart leaders do stupid things.com is the website.
That's great. Thank you so much for all your time today. This book is such a useful guide.
Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you, Michael.
invitation. This has been great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you again.
Thank you.